I should start by saying that I arrived in 2004, straight out of graduate school, and I received the Distinguished Teaching Award in 2010. And what I'm going to talk about now is actually only something I started doing since then, as I felt really secure, and I had tenure, and I had taught classes several times. I teach in linguistics, and I'm lucky that maybe about a third to half of my classes are 30 students or less, undergraduate and graduate both. And what I want to talk about is something I've been experimenting with in what happens when I make a mistake. And so we all make mistakes in every part of life, and teaching is no exception. And our typical instinct, because we are teachers and therefore in charge, is to discover it, correct it, and move on. And in many cases, that's the right thing to do. But I've come to think that in some cases, there is a learning opportunity for the students and for the teacher in that, because it can shift the classroom dynamic in this sort of drastic way that allows you to learn something about the students, and for the students to feel empowered, and for you to learn something in the mix as well. And I will talk about something that happened this semester that really brought it home to me, how much choice we have as teachers if we just pause before we correct. And so the class I'm teaching is, I think I've never done this in a class that's bigger than 30 students. And part of it is that in the classes that are 30 students or less, much of my teaching, maybe 70%, involves every person in the room saying something every class, and they know it, and it's like you're lecturing through something or working through part of the textbook, and everybody has to go through some example or some diagram or something. So it has to be a context where everybody's used to having to say something every class. And also, I've only done it in classes that are upper division or graduate, for students are invested. I don't know how it would work in a class where students are not invested in the subject matter or in the major. And I've only done it in the second half of the semester when I've established some relationship with students, know their names, they know me, know that I'm not in general clueless. So those are all the caveats. Small class, middle of the semester or later, students who are invested. So what happened, I was teaching a very technical class this semester called Logical Semantics, which involves logic, second order modal logic, linguistics, philosophy, and language is very, very, very different from English. And the most difficult thing we did in the class, and it is very difficult when I've told colleagues in other institutions that we read this research paper by a woman from UBC on Lillooet Salish, a very forbiddingly difficult indigenous language of British Columbia, that makes a very strong universal claim about how quantification works, and I say I read it in an undergraduate class, they're like, you're crazy. But I don't think I'm crazy. I've done it 3 times now. What I do normally, that I've done the other 2 times, is I develop a reading guide, and I basically study in one form or another that paper for 3 weeks, because they do a research project where they apply that theory to a different indigenous language, the language I work on, Karuk of Northern California. So they really have many rounds through the paper. But this time, I forgot to post a reading guide. And it was spring break, we were starting the discussion of it after spring break, and halfway through, well, not halfway through, because I had spring break. On the morning, after spring break of teaching, I realized I had not posted the reading guide. And I had one of those moments, oh my God, I've asked him to read this very, very difficult paper that has all sorts of technical, logical, mathematical things in it, and I haven't given them a reading guide. What am I going to do? And I decided that I would go to class and ask if they had a nice spring break, and then apologize for forgetting to post a reading guide and saying, you must have struggled through this paper. I wonder if we could put on this board, I'm in a classroom with 2 separate boards, anything that you felt you understood from the paper, and on this other board, things you definitely didn't understand but you would like to understand. And then because they're used to going through everybody in the room, we could just start. And this incredible thing happened where they had, individuals in the room had understood some really important things about the paper. And many of the things they didn't understand were parts of the paper that we didn't have to cover because it wasn't going to be relevant for the research assignment. And so there was this incredible moment for me to realize how much they'd understood on their own individual students, and they could explain it to the other students in the class because they had to tell me what to write up. So it was one of those peer learning things where I was more the scribe. And this other empowering thing where when they said things that I didn't understand, I could write them up. I could kind of I didn't subdivide the board, I wrote them out, and then I said, and you don't have to understand that, and crossed it out. And that thing was gone. And we probably ended up with equal number of things that they had understood, that they had to understand, and number of things that they had to understand that we didn't know yet. And it, I think, made everybody invested in the paper, and it gave people a chance to feel really proud of what they had understood, and we had a very clear scope of what we still had to do. And then we basically, that became our agenda for the next 3 classes. And when we did closing course reflections on the last day, many students, where they can share highlights, challenges, how we do it on the first day as well, what are you most scared of, what are you most excited of, and you can sort of return to that at the end and see how it all played out. Many people said that they had been very scared of that paper because I said it was very hard, but that they did feel, they didn't understand everything about it. I don't understand everything about that paper. The author doesn't understand everything about that paper. I have talked to her about it many times, but they felt that they had mastered what was essential for them to master. So it was a case where, by not trying to correct it and post a reading guide, I learned something. It shifted the classroom dynamic in a way that kind of stayed with the class. So that's one way of learning from mistakes in teaching. Thank you.